Good evening, America, and welcome to your Wednesday edition of Just the News, No Noise. I'm your host, John Solomon, reporting to you, as always, from Washington, D.C. A big night last night for former President Donald Trump and his respective party, the Republican Party. Not only did Trump secure Wisconsin's 41 delegates to help cement his status as a presumptive Republican nominee, but voters in the Badger State also approved two key constitutional amendments that will help tighten election integrity. The first initiative would ban the private funding of elections, something we used to call on this show Zuckerbucks. Mark Zuckerberg did that. So it keeps that money out of the democratic process. The second would restrict election administration to only election officials designated by law. In other words, no private people stepping in and messing with the election. Now, while Republicans took a victory lap last night, President Biden's campaign concerns continue to grow. Just last month in Michigan, the presumptive Democratic nominee faced a sizable protest vote, as just over 100,000 voters voted uncommitted rather than support the incumbent president. However, very similar to Michigan, 9.8% of Democrats last night voted uninstructed on their ballot. That was their protest vote. This widespread support shows the Democrat Party's internal dissent and largely spurs from the controversial way in which the Biden-Harris administration is handling the conflict between Israel and Hamas. We have more to come on this, but real quick, I want to turn things over to my amazing co-host, Amanda Head. She's in Los Angeles. She always has some great headlines. Amanda, what's on your radar?
Good evening, John. Yes, the Biden administration news, the big news coming down the pike once again. This time, it once again impacts our country's readiness to respond to disaster, which used to not be something that we had to worry about too much, but, Biden administration. Imagine that. According to the Department of Energy, the government would not be purchasing 3 million barrels of oil as part of an effort to refill the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, saying that they are keeping the taxpayers' interest at the forefront. Now, the administration's target for the buy was $79 per barrel, but its purchase of 2.8 million barrels last month averaged approximately $81 per barrel. So perhaps it's the Biden-Harris administration's lackluster trade policy and simple refusal to drill our own resources, which is why they can't get the price down to their target. But regardless of those real solutions, experts in the oil and gas industry are skeptical of Secretary Granholm's pledge to refill the SPR by the end of this year. Now, meanwhile, a little teaser for our steadfast viewers and something that we'll be getting more into this coming Friday revolves around the House Republicans urging the Government Accountability Office to investigate what safeguards the National Institutes of Health has in place to ensure that China does not use research funds to bolster its military or unethically use humans in research studies. Dr. Robert Malone, Dr. Harvey Risch, and several others are going to weigh in on Friday right here on at 6 p.m. And here on the show, you all have heard us have many conversations about COVID and some of the issues that have extended from COVID and the vaccines and side effects. So we're going to have more of that on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And John, I know that you've got some other things on your radar. What's going on?
As we mentioned, it's almost been 2 weeks since the House passed the $1.2 trillion federal spending package. Many of the lawmakers who oppose the minibus, as it's being called, are still airing their grievances with the legislation. Speaker Mike Johnson appears to be on the hot seat for pushing the bill through with just 24 hours notice. Whether or not he retains his post for the rest of the year remains to be seen. But a lot of the fiscal conservatives in Washington are working overtime right now to get some fiscal sanity back into this town. One of them is joining us right now. He's a congressman representing the great state of Ohio, Congressman Warren Davidson. Sir, good to have you on the show.
Yeah, always an honor to join you, John. Thank you.
We love having you because you always have ideas. You always are pushing to try to get this crazy spending to stop. Give us an update on where things stand. There's a lot going on behind the scenes, even though we're in congressional recess. Let us know what's going on.
Well, what's going on behind the scenes is, apparently a $1.9 trillion deficit, which is the size of the deficit this year, projected, isn't quite big enough. So they're planning on coming back and voting on a supplemental that'll get us up over a $2 trillion deficit. Wow. And so, this wouldn't even necessarily fund America, although they're pitching it as, oh, no, it's great. All the defense contractors are going to make their stuff in America, so it'll be great for us. But it'll fund Ukraine's border security. It'll fund Israel's border security, which is a great cause. Unfortunately, the Biden administration is also planning to put a port into Gaza to fund the other side of the war. It'll fund Taiwan, and who knows what else it'll fund. But it isn't going to fix our border security, and it isn't going to deliver on the promise that Republicans always campaign on, which is a smaller government. And if we really had a party that was for smaller government, occasionally you would see a smaller government. But unfortunately, the reality is every Congress it grows.
Congressman, on social media, to keep your sanity, people always say don't read the comments. But when you're a politician, you kind of have to, because you have to know what your constituents are thinking. And I'm just thinking with respect to spending, they're not reading the comments, because I see every single person who voted for this minibus, their comment section is filled with voters who say, don't vote yes on this. We don't want this. This is not what we support. Are they just not listening?
Well, they know what to say. Virtually every Republican, you go check their campaign sites. This is kind of a pastime of mine every now and then when I have a debate with colleagues. Right. I'll go look up their campaign literature, and they all, some version of the phrase, I support a smaller, more accountable government. But yet every Congress, we vote for a bigger, less accountable government. And if there are hearings or letters sent, there's no real action taken. And, one of my good friends in Congress is Congressman Jim Jordan. He chairs the Judiciary Committee and this new Weaponization Committee. And I think he alone has sent more subpoenas than the entire rest of Congress. And, that's the prerogative of a committee chairman. So, the rest of us can basically plead for subpoenas to be sent, but we don't get to decide. So in some level, there's an accountability gap, but the real gap is delivering on the promise of a smaller government.
Yeah, and so many signs of its encroachment. The bigger government gets, the more encroaches on our liberty and our basic rights here. I want to ask, I think there are some innovative ideas that some of the fiscal conservatives are thinking of trying when they get back. Give us some thoughts about what, there's a way to turn the Ukraine aid into loans, I guess. What are some of the things that could be done to lessen the burden on Americans? Because it seems like the appropriators, they just want to keep appropriating.
Yeah, look who blocked Jim Jordan from becoming speaker. It was the appropriators. Right. The chairwoman and multiple of the cardinals, the people that lead the various divisions of appropriations. Their objection was to Jim Jordan because they knew he would actually deliver on a smaller government, and they'd rather keep spending than have somebody who would, even if they were in the minority, than have somebody who would actually check spending. So that was very disappointing. And, when it comes to Ukraine aid, the level of bipartisan support for this is off the charts. And so to kind of build momentum, they're like, well, what if we just seize all of Russia's assets wherever we can get access to Russian money? And then we transfer that money to Ukraine because Russia was clearly the aggressor in the conflict. And so that makes it a lot more palatable. It's like, well, if you want to spend Russia's money, that's different than if you want to spend my taxpayers' money. And so that's at least part of the solution. This is something called the Repo Act.
Yeah.
Incredible. Sir, I love how you deal with some people on social media. There was a recent report out that 25% of Gen Zers say that they need therapists to deal with tax filing stress. 54% of them said filing taxes has either brought them to tears in the past or recently, or it will this time around. You brought up an idea, something that you've already drafted and something that I know you are itching to get to the floor at some point someday. I don't know if many of your colleagues would support us, but tell us about your support of repealing the 16th Amendment.
Well, I think it's great news that the Gen Zers are distressed by paying income taxes, because I too hate the income tax. And originally, the country didn't have an income tax. They passed the 16th Amendment to make it legal to tax people's income. And it was originally just going to be for the really, really rich people. And of course, now it's hitting everybody. And even if you don't have a lot of income, you still have to file. So the government spies on everything. Like, did somebody pay you? Did you pay somebody? Did you buy or sell something? Did you make or lose money? Did you give a gift or receive a gift? Was the gift too generous? Like, get out of my life and get a warrant if you need to know all this stuff. It's way too much government. And for that reason, I've offered a bill to repeal the 16th Amendment. I would love to get a recorded vote on that.
Yeah, I think a lot of Americans would like to see where their member of Congress stands on that one. That could be a big one. Another one that I know is very close to your heart, and I know it was a big agenda item when Republicans took over in January 2023, FISA reform. It's kind of been just lingering there. Another deadline coming up this month. What are the chances of getting something meaningful done to protect civil liberties?
Yeah, I've continued to speak with, the Speaker, with Chairman Jordan, who's chair of Judiciary Committee, and with Chairman Turner, who's the chair of the Intel Committee. And, this bill has, in theory, it's a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, so it's an Intel bill. But there's a reason there's no Domestic Surveillance Intelligence Act. It's because Americans are supposed to be protected by the Fourth Amendment. And what's clear is American citizens' data are being swept up in this collection effort. So I think there's broad support for the surveillance on foreigners. But when it comes to U.S. citizens, we think you need to get a warrant. And so that's the base component of the judiciary bill. And then I've got an amendment that, we hope to make in order that would be part of what we have as the Fourth Amendment's not for sale. It's an act that passed the Judiciary Committee 38-1. So this doesn't break on normal party lines. It's one of the only things in Congress right now that doesn't break down a Republican versus Democrat line. It's really, more civil liberties versus national security. We're going to spy on you, but it's just to keep you safe. Don't worry. But it's kind of a police state kind of thing. And it goes into the idea behind the Patriot Act. So we need to roll some of those things back and put some accountability on the intelligence agencies, which are clearly abusing the authority that they have.
Yeah. Congressman, something near and dear to your heart, manufacturing. Under the Trump administration, we saw billions of dollars worth of commerce and manufacturing repatriated because of a favorable climate. And now we are seeing basically the opposite. You've got HR 7171 that I know is near and dear to your heart because of some Ohio-based businesses, specifically Cleveland Cliffs. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so look, the administration, no secret, they're big fans of the Green New Deal. And this doesn't really hurt manufacturing per se. It just hurts it in America. You can't buy energy in America. You can't easily make steel. You can't mine. You can't, do anything that's petrochemical based. And the electrical grid is heavily favored by the supply chain that China's got. And if that wasn't bad enough, when we add extra demand onto our electrical grid, you say, okay, well, part of the infrastructure bill should be rebuilding America's infrastructure and growing our electrical grid and making it more secure. The main supplier of that steel is Cleveland Cliffs, uniform grain electrical steel. And the Biden administration is in the process of having a rule that would outlaw uniform grain electrical steel and would go to something called amorphous electrical steel, which is made in Europe and China. So it would totally benefit other countries and hurt American production. The United Auto Workers and American industry are broadly united behind this, but the Green New Deal, climatologists, kind of its own cult religion, we can't have American manufacturing. It's bad for the climate. Never mind all the coal-fired power plants that are running China's manufacturing base.
It is an amazing slap in the face, and many slaps in the face of the great auto workers of this country, what this administration has done. Congressman, always great to see you in action. You're always fighting for common sense and fiscal conservatism in our nation's capital. Great to have you on today.
Always an honor. Thank you. God bless you and your viewers.
Thank you, sir. Good to have you on. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. On the other side of those messages, we'll be talking with National Security Advisor Dr. Waleed Phares about the airstrike on Iran's consulate in Syria. A lot of people talking about that today. We'll have that right after these messages.
So when they talk about equity, they don't talk about building people up. They talk about bringing people down to the lowest level, so everyone has an equal outcome. Everyone sucks.
If there was any doubt, at this point we know Mayor Pete is not the right man for the job.
Not that I would ever do this. I could be a better spokesperson for Joe Biden if I was to just sell my soul to the devil than they are. I know their own talking points better than they do.
America, as we approach another critical election, a wave of concern is washing over this country. Recent studies reveal that an astonishing 56% of our fellow citizens report feelings of anxiety or dread about the upcoming presidential election. That's why I stand with AMAC. AMAC is more than a senior discount organization. During these challenging times, they fight for common sense and hope that our nation returns to traditional American values. Visit amac.us/Just News today to seize this exclusive election year special, a 4-year AMAC membership for just $30. That's unbelievable. As an AMAC member, you not only enjoy money-saving benefits, but also the AMAC magazine, free Social Security and Medicare advice, a trusted voice in Washington, in a community of like-minded patriots who love this great country and want to keep it the way it was. Take advantage of this election year special, 4 years for $30, and be part of the solution over the next 4 years by becoming an AMAC member. Now, when you do that, you're strengthening a movement dedicated to preserving the principles we all hold dear. Join now at amac.us/Just News. That's AMAC, AMAC.us/Just News.
Welcome back, everybody. As many of you saw in the news in the wee hours of Monday, an airstrike took out Iran's consulate in Syria's capital city of Damascus. Now, Iranian officials said the strike came from Israel. According to reports from Iranian media, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' top commander for Syria and Lebanon were among those killed. Now Iran's supreme leader, Al-Khamenei, has vowed to retaliate in the name of revenge, saying Israel will be punished. So joining us now to talk more about the state of our safety and ongoing conflict within the Middle East is Dr. Walid Baris, a national security advisor to many presidential candidates and the author of the book, Iran. Dr. Faris, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me today.
It's wonderful for you to be here, and I'm very excited to ask you about this because I know that when people saw this news break, they thought that this was likely a pretty significant escalation, but there was something very strategic and tactical about it from Israel's side. Can you talk about that?
Yes, absolutely. First, those who have been eliminated in this raid are high-ranking officials in this federation of militias that stretches from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon. I would even add Yemen and Gaza, of course. So the Israelis have messaged the Iran regime to stop moving weapons, including ballistic missiles and maybe weapons of mass destruction, chemicals, etc., throughout this plateau between Iraq and Syria. And it looks like the Israelis understood that the command posts in Damascus are in control of the northern front. So they are the ones who direct Hezbollah. They are the ones who direct probably even Hamas. So that was a message by the Israelis. I mean, viewers would think this is a one strike for one goal. No, this is part of the war between Israel and Iran throughout militias. But the Israelis act directly. They did that strike, which is very, very clearly a message to the Iran regime. And then they eliminated the man who would eventually, with time, would have become the next Soleimani, the next commander of all of these militias.
Yeah, a big win for security when someone like that finally gets taken out. Dr. Faris, I want to talk a little bit about the Biden administration's decision-making. We know that they've allowed all these oil sales to go and fill the coffers of Iran, which makes Iran stronger to do these proxy war activities that they've been doing. In Gaza, there's been a lot of State Department funding for organizations that appear to have some ties to bad actors, the Islamic Jihad in Palestine, particularly a group called the Phoenix Center. Tell us a little bit why the Biden administration would be so careless in allowing money to go to places that we know are working with bad actors.
Look, number one, this specific case of the Phoenix Center is clear. Two congressmen, two members of Congress have directed that letter, and then they want answers. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. I've been for the last 25 years at least, and some of my colleagues warning that the vetting process at the State Department, across the administration, across the agencies, I would add even, has a problem. Because when you ask what would this center, be with regard to the U.S. government in terms of policy, the experts, quote unquote, some of them at least, or those who vet, may be sympathetic to these goals. So when an organization is basically, spreading the ideas, the ideologies of Hamas, and somebody within our own bureaucracy says, well, that's fine, this is a liberation movement, this is a resistance movement, they find stuff about it to convince the decision makers to grant them money. The problem is not anymore this organization, it's us, it's our bureaucracy. And it's not just the Phoenix Center. Across the United States, there have been many, many similar centers, NGOs in many states that have been granted or given privileges by the bureaucracy. And not just in the United States, as you just mentioned. Aid has been channeled to Gaza. Aid has been channeled to NGOs, so-called NGOs in Lebanon, who appeared later on to be, a front for Hezbollah. Same could be said about Iraq and eastern Syria and other places. I would even include Yemen. So we have a systemic problem, John, which is the presence of or the influence of either vetters or, influence agents, I would call them, or bureaucrats who are sympathizers. That's why. And that's why I'm concerned about the second vetting that comes from the intel community. I mean, I understand the first vetting comes from the State Department or USAID, for example, and that could be influenced, penetrated, infiltrated. We know that. Agencies should be the second layer of vetting and should prevent this from happening.
Incredible. Sir, I wanted to ask you about a strange dynamic. The Biden administration is reportedly considering a sale of weapons packages to Israel. So you've got, I think, about 50 F-15s. You've got munitions packages along with missiles. Just the aircraft alone is valued at, I think, $18 billion. At the same time, as John mentioned, we are directly or indirectly supporting Iran as well. Just, I mean, their cash on hand has exploded by billions just because of the sanctions lifted. Is this administration effectively supporting both sides?
Yes, in fact, and unfortunately, that's what has been happening, and not just Israel and Iran, but also the Saudis, the Emiratis, and the other Arab allies that we have. We sign contracts with them, and then we pressure them for certain policies. I'm going to start with the Arabs, and then I'll come back to Israel. For example, in Yemen, we have contracts with Riyadh, contracts with Abu Dhabi, and then at the same time, we ask those two ally governments to stop their campaign against the Houthi terrorists, who are the agents or the agencies linked to the Iran regime. So we find ourselves now in 2023-24 as having to go to the Red Sea, having to strike back at the Houthis, and in a very limited matter. Though in 2021, we have asked the Saudis and the other Arab coalition partners to stop and withdraw. Otherwise, we'll cancel the contracts. Otherwise, we won't send smart munitions, so on and so forth. That game is very dangerous. So we have an agreement, for example, with Israel. Yes, we'll send you planes, we'll send you stuff, but you're going to have a ceasefire with Hamas. You're going to stop your escalation against Hezbollah. You're not going to strike inside Iran. So this policy is extremely dangerous because we are using basically what we offer to our allies, and most of our allies actually buy them. And then as a tool to pressure their policies. And that policy, at the end of the day, as you just said, is in the interest of the Iran deal. Who will profit from us pressuring the Saudi Arabians, UAE, Israel, and even the other actors in the region? The Iran regime. So in my view, the Iran deal is a transaction that many people are profiting from and is a tool to pressure our allies and our partners in the region.
Such a head scratcher. Dr. Farley, we got about a minute left. I want to ask real quickly about the Biden administration's plans to push forward with the Palestinian Authority as the likely successor to Hamas. It has been rife with corruption for years. It doesn't really even have the trust of the people in Gaza. Why are they pushing this out right now?
Look, they have the information. The Biden administration has the information. They know that the best Palestinian, in exile are those who have been chased out by Hamas and by the Palestinian Authority. We know the authority has a lot of problems, including financial and other similar problems. Why don't they work with the UAE again? And the Saudis and the Egyptians and the Jordanians, they are the ones who know who these Palestinians are. If you want to reform Gaza after Hamas is dismantled and have some sort of local bureaucracy, local government, we're going to the wrong addresses. We can go to Abu Dhabi, Riyadh, Cairo, Amman, and work with them. What is our foreign policy doing at this point in time? They should be preparing for the after Hamas situation and not preparing us for a very difficult situation after Hamas is out and try to come back as a guerrilla force.
Well, this conflict and this conversation is not going anywhere. So I know one thing: we are going to need you, Dr. Phares, back on the show very soon to discuss this. Thank you for being here, sir. Everybody go check out his book, Iran. Very easy name to remember and a very important book. So go to wherever you buy books and check out that book by Dr. Walid Phares. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but we'll be back with National Religious Broadcasters President and CEO Troy Miller after these messages.
Donald Trump is at peak "are you kidding me" right now. He has been swimming at the bottom of the MAGA reptile tank, appearing on shows like America's Top 10 Countdown with Wayne Allen Root, The Dr. Gina Show on Real America's Voice. Kim Jong-un's old pal Donald is busy talking to anyone who might sit there and nod in agreement. He did an interview with something called Real America's Voice, which might not even be a real thing. But
what is that network?
Real America's Voice. Bannon's on it. Charlie Kirk's on it. It's a TV network. It's a down market, Truth Social.
It's like
I don't know why that's a laugh fest, but yes, Real America's Voice is now breaking through the white noise of the mainstream media with Charlie Kirk, War Room, of course, John Fredericks early morning. You got Gruber, Miranda Kahn, Tara Dahl, Jack Posobiec. You've got Just the News, a show that follows us. It's just incredible. John Solomon. You've got an incredible lineup, and it's starting to have an impact.
Welcome back, America. The United Nations adopted a resolution last week calling for an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. Notably, the United States declined to veto the resolution and back its longest and most important ally in the Middle East. Lots of people have been talking about that. Is America really in Israel's corner anymore? That's a question we ask often on this show. We're very lucky to be joined right now by the president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters Association, Troy Miller. Troy, great to have you on the show.
Hey, John, great. Thanks for having me today.
So many Christians have always been proud of the American alliance with Israel, but over the last 4 or 5 months, despite the heinous attack on Israel by Hamas, it seems like American resolve to back Israel is waning. A concern not only for Israel, but for a lot of Americans, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're waning. I don't know if it's waning or if the current administration has just flat out abandoned Israel. You started off with their lack of vetoing the resolution that went before the UN. Not only that, but the resolution itself was just terrible. It didn't mention anything about Hamas or anything about the over 130 hostages that are still being held. 5 Americans are being held. Have we abandoned Israel and the 5 American hostages that are being held somewhere in Gaza? Where are we today with our support for Israel? I think the Biden administration has been just folded to its far left voices who look at Israel as the oppressor, which is crazy. I was in Israel back in December. I firsthand look at some of the atrocities that happened on October 7th. And look, we should be behind Israel 100%, not just because they're our strongest ally in the Middle East and the close ties between the Christian and Jewish communities, but the inhumanity that went on that day. Everyone around the world should just condemn, and Hamas itself should condemn. And the only message out of America should be Hamas's unconditional surrender and the immediate release and return of the hostages.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Biden administration has waffled more than Eggo on this, and he's managed to enrage, I think, both sides. You are heading to Israel, though, next month. Tell us about what you're going to